morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us at the Blowback roundtable. We've got a great roundtable this morning. 5 of us. I'm in the left coast. Ben's in Hungary. Carlo's in DC. Chris, I think, is in Canada somewhere.
Ontario, just north of Lake Ontario. So
and
north of
Walter
Rochester.
Okay. Thank you. Walter is in Brussels. Is that right?
Near Brussels. Yeah, near Brussels.
Near Brussels. So
Yeah.
I just want to thank everybody for joining us. I really appreciate everybody's participation. But where are we going to begin? That's the question. Obviously, Israel-Palestine is what everybody is discussing. That's where the major events are taking place. I think I will put Ben on the spot, and I will ask him to guide our discussion into the first topic.
Jesus, I don't know. The last couple of days, okay, last time we were live was Tuesday, and right after the show, I sort of kept up with the news, and there were 2 bombings. One that night was the hospital, the Al-Aqli, what do you call it? Not Baptist hospital. Yeah, the Baptist hospital. And last night I did the same, staying up very late, looking at the oldest Orthodox church, third oldest church in the world. Sort of part of it being bombed, not the whole thing. And I kept up with what the IDF is saying, and then sort of recanting, then giving another evidence, then the Western media. And you shouldn't do that. It's just not good for your mental health. But you know, all the rampage going on there. Wow, the Middle East, it really is. It's a tinderbox. There's protests and mass uprisings pretty much everywhere. Is I guess the setting for today's discussions. I was very worried. I'm glad I woke up and nothing terrible has happened with the greatest fleet America has assembled in maybe 20 years, sitting in the East Mediterranean. And it's just, you know, it's looking like, add to that the final piece of the cake when the White House was dressed blood red, illuminated, as well as that. Carlo knows what's the big tall monument that was red too.
Washington Monument.
The Washington Monument was blood red, and Biden gave the speech. I think about 18 minutes of we should be at war with everyone. We're building the arsenal of democracy again, and don't worry, it's an investment that will pay dividends in the future. That is the security of Ukraine and Israel and the southern border and Taiwan and pretty much everything in that $100 billion bill that he's trying to request from Congress. That's a good starting point. Anybody want to jump in?
Well, anyway? let's talk about the hospital. I mean, that has been the firestorm of controversy. Obviously, Hamas bombed themselves, killing 500 people because they're incompetent and they have these really powerful munitions, apparently. And the West, you know, they changed their story several times. But didn't they take credit for it at first, or certain people did, and then they decided?
There's this Hanayama something. He's the digital spokesperson, Netanyahu's close friend, his employee, and he said, "Oh yes, we bombed these terrorists because they hide in hospitals." And like an hour later, he deleted that, and they did this themselves. Here's video evidence, which then was deleted. And then there was audio evidence of 2 Hamas operatives apparently talking with very thick Hebrew accents, like, "Hey, we're next doors in this cemetery, and look, did you see that hospital? Oh, fuck, our little missile went on the wrong." It's completely and then they used Al Jazeera's footage, which kind of disproves them. And Al Jazeera said, "Here's our investigation. You're completely wrong on this." So now they're trying to boot Al Jazeera from the territory. From the Palestinian territory. That's what I was awake looking at this. It's horrific. There's between 500 and 800 people dead there. You know, that is like Palestine health statistic. There's horrible images, but it gets. And the next day I wake up and America just had the Hamas blast at the hospital.
Yeah,
and
it's the same in Canada. We got the same a covering for Israel and blaming it on Hamas when Hamas does not have munitions. That was a 1,000-pound bomb. Only that could cause an explosion like that. If you watch the video at JDAM, and only Israel has those bombs.
That's what Chris Hedges has pointed that out. Yeah. 2 other things. Norman Finkelstein has a brilliant article on the fact that this is not the first time Israel has
Oh,
bombed.
by no means.
No.
And also that the tape, the short tape that's supposed to be two Hamas individuals making an exchange, it's been pretty much debunked now as being a fake, as being fraudulent. So,
And where do they get the JDAMs? Does Israel produce those themselves?
Well, I
It's an
think
American.
yes, an American piece of equipment attaches to a bomb, makes it a guided bomb. They can guide it. So I think it's American supplied technology with maybe an MK-83 or 84 type 900-pound bomb, 1,000-pound bomb. Only if you never have you ever seen when the Hamas rockets hit Israel an explosion like that?
No, and the thing is,
No.
I went back to check on the statistics. Like, I don't know how many. Let's say a couple of thousand Hamas rockets cost the lives of maybe 50 people. Those are a little more than fireworks. Sometimes there's damage to a car.
Yeah.
That's basically what they have. Nothing with the power.
That can do that. No.
You can hear that scream on the original video. Second time they posted it without audio because that.
Yeah.
And people who have been near. Vanessa Beeley comes to mind. Eva Bartlett comes to mind, who have been near JDAMs. Also, Max Blumenthal at the Grain Zone said you can immediately know that's a JDAM attack.
Right.
But no, in the West, first it was Israel. This is the New York Times within an hour. Israel's strike claims more than 500 people. Second, a strike from unknown origin claims 500 people. And the third one, what they settled on was a blast, kills more than 500 people. That was within an hour. It turned from an Israeli airstrike to just a blast.
Yeah, but I think Carla is correct that you look at the history of Israeli attacks on Gaza for the last decade or more. They're continually bombing civilian buildings and bombing civilians. And they've ordered the Gazans to leave. And you can see this as a deliberate attack of terror to frighten the hell out of them, to force them to leave.
Absolutely. And by the way, a lot of, I can't recall it off my head. I killed it from the cheat sheet because it was way too long, but a lot of religious organizations in Palestine. I think the Anglicans were one of them, maybe the Reformed something, Christian said. Yeah, we remember we got the same phone calls. They said it was absolutely obvious that they were warned to leave, and they said, we're not going to leave our patients only to heaven. That was the answer, heroic answer, if you ask me. But when the BBC dismantled this, those two BBC guys got fired. 4 BBC Middle East correspondents got fired so far. Channel 4 News also dismantled it. They're gone. It's just, there's this purge. Mehdi Hassan, one of the 3 CNBC guys who are Muslim, just got axed. It's just people who just say for 1 minute what's going on. They're just being purged.
The CBC had a report today of a neurosurgeon at a hospital in Toronto who on Twitter debunked these beheading stories of children and by Hamas and so on, was fired yesterday.
That's it.
For speaking his mind. He's been blacklisted. He's been dismissed. You can't speak the truth here.
It's amazing, but it's also amazingly desperate. I mean, this was just before Biden arrived. And, you know, these guys said, we're going to move in. There's going to be a ground offensive. And then they said, we're not going to move on a ground offensive before Biden arrives. And this guy, he spent 5 or 6 hours in Tel Aviv. In presidential visits, that's nothing. Just to sit in a sleepy way to say the other team did it. And he fucked right off back home. There was a second video of him on the jet. I don't know if you guys have seen that. Nobody knows what he's talking about. But I love that Blinken's like behind him, like a ventriloquist. Time.
Wouter, is the media landscape in Brussels better than Canada or the United States?
It's exactly the same thing. A couple of days ago, someone of the military came to explain that it was 100% certain it was Hamas who did it. And for me, what is surprising is the speed of conclusion.
Right.
Apart from the correctness, the speed of conclusion, they don't think anymore. They act like in a reflex and always the same thing.
Not supposed to.
I've been on a protest in Brussels from the Palestine support movement, and very energetic in front of Foreign Affairs of Brussels. police was very quiet, very backstanding, not wanting to cause any problems. They had to, after the protest, move, take away the scarves, take away the flags, but that was the only thing.
Oh, they're symbols of Hamas now. I think that's a law in London.
Yeah.
I didn't know if they are too.
In Germany, that might be prohibited in the near future. I don't know the right name. The scarf,
The
black and
keffiyeh,
white.
the
Keffiyeh,
Palestinian scarf, yeah, and of course the flag.
and
That's
of
now
course the flag.
an authoritarian flag.
So they confiscated all the protesters' scarves and flags.
No, they just asked after the protest, after the march, to take it out, put it away, and move on. And of course, people 100 meters further, they took it back up. So it was quite mild, but that's a certain type of censorship. But in Belgium, we don't have the police repression that we see, for example, against the yellow vests in France. It's still not
More
nice,
moderate.
but yeah. So
Non-violent.
Has anyone seen the fact that these are two Christian hospitals have any kind of impact out? I mean, in the United States, Baptists are, they're evangelical Christians. That and that was one of their churches. Has anybody seen any evidence that this is impacting on their understanding and relationship to Israel?
Well, that I've seen the Canadian American press surveying it this morning, there's nothing. And the only thing the Canadian press is that Canada's had 41 diplomats kicked out of India for pissing off India. And the Russians have charged that Nazi SS officer that appeared in Parliament. The Russians have charged him with genocide now. And that's still an ongoing scandal here.
That was interesting that came from Shoigu, who's the defense minister. I thought it should have come from either justice or foreign affairs, but it comes from Shoigu. Like it's a military affair to charge this Yaroslav Hunka guy. I'm enjoying that. I think they want public trials with Belarus in Minsk, and I would watch the shit out of that. But obviously, Canada has to reel from that. That was the first big mask-off moment.
Oh yeah, it was just disgusting, and again here in Canada, there's been all sorts of people trying to make apologies for it, finger pointing about who's responsible for it. I mean, the whole House of Commons, every member of Parliament should have resigned. They all clapped enthusiastically for that Nazi, and so did Zelensky. Everybody saw him clapping this SS soldier,
pumping his fists. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, mask off moment one, mask off moment two is Gaza, basically. It's very different from when America ruled all the public opinion in the world. It really is. There's been mass protests all around the Middle East, including Europe, where it's banned. Thank you for that, Wouter. I mean, it was been outlawed for a better part of a week, I think, in England, and every night they're in front of the BBC headquarters. And then they had this little segment not explaining it, saying, well, we kind of misinformed you on the Hamas is Palestine thing. They're not the same thing. Go on with your day. They sort of issued that on the BBC. But
yeah, what's going on in general reminds me of that quote that I read once before on our program by Giordano Bruno in 1584. That strong anti-imperialist quote from Ash Wednesday Supper. It's a brilliant quote. In fact, it's so brilliant, I copied it out again in case the occasion arose. And I think this is what's essentially happening worldwide. I first drew the quote out because it was so apt around the Vietnam War. But it goes like this. It's from Bruno's Ash Wednesday Supper, Cena della Ceneri, 1584. Of course, Bruno was drawn and quartered and burned alive by the Catholic Church for his many planets, many worlds theory. But the quote goes like this: "The helmsmen of explorations have discovered how to disturb the peace of others, to profane the guardian spirits of their countries, to mix what prudent nature is separated, to redouble men's desires by commerce, to add the vices of one people to those of the other, to propagate new follies by force, and set up unheard of lunacies where they did not exist before, and finally to give out the stronger as the wiser. They have shown men new ways, new instruments and new arts by which to tyrannize over and assassinate one another. Thanks to such deeds, a time will come when other peoples, having learned from the injuries they suffered, will know how and be able, as circumstances change, to pay back to us in similar forms or worse ones the consequences of these pernicious inventions.
Carlo, I see your quote and I raise you a Joe Biden quote. America is the indispensable and exceptional nation. We are a beacon of freedom and democracy in the world. So take your Giordano Bruno and no.
I'll raise you a John Milton. I'll raise you a
Giordano
John
Bruno.
Milton to wage by this is Biden's foreign policy, to wage by force or guile eternal war. And guess who's speaking that in Paradise Lost? Satan. It's Satan's words, and that's American foreign policy in a nutshell.
Biden looked possessed a little bit. At least he looked like he was on some good drugs, some uppers. And the White House was all in a crimson red with the Washington Capitol, so it's similar to Satan. So did anybody catch his speech last night? Just he's asking for a big funding bill. He wants to do a comprehensive funding bill of Israel, for Ukraine, for the southern border, to get the Republicans on board. And I don't know if it's a one and done that'll last through the next election cycle, but it is quite large funding bill. And he's had some issues getting things funded because there's some intransigent Republicans trying to block money for Ukraine, etc. So did anybody catch his pitch, his sales pitch, where he invoked American exceptionalism and talked about us as Americans? We need to unite as Americans to defeat these evils and protect freedom and democracy. So, I mean, that's the pitch that still a lot of people are foolish enough to embrace.
I caught it, but the pitch was no longer freedom and democracy. And this is something that Maria Zakharova already pointed out, which is the spokesperson for the Russian Foreign Ministry, because the end of that speech was, this is a big investment for the American security and it will pay dividends down the road. And Maria said, well, we thought you were fighting for values and freedom and democracy, but it turns out all of that death is just an investment. Is something, but yeah, I was unfortunate to see the whole 18 minutes of it, but Chris, I already
definitely invoked these principles, but he also referred to it as an investment. So, he hit two birds.
Two go together, because when a leader like that claims that his country is the exceptional nation or the indispensable nation, that's a colonialist attitude. He's speaking as if he is the emperor and everybody else is part of belonging to their colonies, and so. The money for Ukraine and Israel is to them an investment, because that's the colonial attitude, to go and exploit colonies everywhere and create them, exploit the world for their own riches. So it does tie together in that way.
That's true. To keep doing it, that's what the investment is.
Yeah. That's what, yeah. And everybody knows now, the American people should know, that Ukraine is essentially defeated. It's just a matter of time before the ultimate collapse. The Russians are moving west gradually. And with deliberation. And Putin was in Rostov-on-Don, I think, yesterday to inspect the troops and meet with Gerasimov. So something may be brewing, maybe around Avdiivka, but they may finally take that town after bitter fighting. But the Ukrainian offensive has completely collapsed. The Russians are now on the offensive. The war's lost. No amount of money is going to save it. And now they're involved with Israel. And if this war becomes a larger one with Turkey and Syria and Hezbollah and so on, who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah, who knows? And everybody's making moves on like, it's becoming more and more unpredictable, I'd say. But as you said, Avdiivka, it's in one of those pincers that they did.
Yeah, there's almost a cauldron now. They've pretty much controlled the entire area, and I think there's 10 to 15,000 Ukrainian troops. Plus, I think I hear a lot of NATO troops, maybe a lot of Poles, but also probably Americans, British, and Canadian advisors in there, or troops that we don't know.
Yeah, true. But when it comes to what Billy Bob, this is how we hook it up. What interests me is the economics. I mean, we just had the third Belt and Road Forum in Beijing, and there's this one big hall where there's little desks where people just sign contracts. And day one, I got this report. It was like 97 billion worth of contracts among 300 companies signed. That's already it. That's the equivalent of what Joe Biden is asking for. I think, correct me, 60 billion going to Ukraine, the failed project, 30 something going to Israel, a little bit to Taiwan, and a little bit to the southern border to appease those Republicans who say we're being invaded for the South. So exactly the same. And apparently for the last, just this month, that's pretty much the growth of the US debt every week. I mean, this month is growing by 600 billion. And it's, what I don't see is how this is sustainable, you know, unless there's actual real war, because that always resets these things. I mean, is Joe Biden actually aiming for let's just break something out everywhere? Further thing, just to bring in, this is Chris's area of expertise, is the law at the UN. First, there was the UN Security Council, a Russian proposal saying we need a ceasefire now and let's bring in aid, everybody stop. It was shot down by Japan, France, the United Kingdom, and the US. Okay, it didn't blame Hamas. The second one from Brazil, it actually blamed Hamas, and the US vetoed it completely alone, completely isolated. Mm-hmm. They still vetoed it. Yeah. And by the way, that pissed the Chinese off. The Chinese said there is absolutely no justification for this. How could you do this? Because the church attack, that was after it. That's sort of blood on their hands. Not exactly how the Chinese put it, their way to. But seriously, is the US looking into an economic abyss? And is this a way out for some people in the leadership circles? Because that seems insane to me.
Well, you know, the capitalist system, as Mark said, the war is always a way out. When you have overproduction, you destroy it. Is that what they're trying to do? When they're risking nuclear war, I don't know. Perhaps that's true, but because why do we have the inflation? We have inflation, rising prices for two things: shortage of commodities, but also because of the devalued American dollar. And the more they keep printing it, the more it devalues, and that's probably the main cause of inflation in the world. And it's damaging everybody here in Canada, Europe, United States, everywhere else. So how long can that go on before the whole system goes haywire? So maybe.
This brings me to a topic I wanted to bring up. So there's kind of two schools of thought about the whole Israel-Palestine thing. One is that it's a grand master plan, right? That Hamas was allowed to do what they're going to do because it's going to, enable and justify whatever response they have planned. So it's, it's grand strategy. The other belief, which I happen to have, is that, Hamas was successful and they caught Israel with their pants down, so to speak. And everybody is reacting, chaotically reacting to a successful attack that, demonstrates and exposes Israel's weakness and the weakness of the left. Or the West, the weakness of the West. So, Walter, I wanted to get you in. What is your take? I mean, on the two perspectives. Is this a design strategy in order to justify and implement a response, or is it more of chaos and people trying to figure out, oh shit, what are we going to do now? How are we going to deal with all this?
I think it might have long ago been a design plan in order the funding of Hamas, but the attack itself, I don't see it because the reaction is so chaotic and they don't control the narrative enough. They don't control the military part of enough. If they have put a couple of years thought into that should run much more butter smooth than it is right now, I think. Unless they are very very much caught up in their hubris and they think, okay, we're gonna let ourselves be attacked so we can get another land grab, which the land grab is succeeding because it's not the north of Gaza, it's just land grab. I mean, if you chase everybody away, of course the warriors, the resistance fighters will not stay there in the tunnels because you can catch everybody very easily with heavy military power. So
it could be some opportunism, some opportunistic ethnic cleansing that wasn't necessarily planned in advance. They're taking advantage of the situation.
Yeah, I agree. I also agree with Walter that first of all, their attempt to people's attempt to say this is like Pearl Harbor, they let it happen to have a pretext for a war, I don't think flies, because it takes away from Hamas's success. It was quite clearly a military success, and it surprised the Israelis and the Americans and everybody else in Europe. Yes, Hamas was created or supported financially and politically by Israel for many years, when it was created to draw people away from the PLO, which they succeeded in doing, is splitting the Palestinian people between the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank and the Hamas. I'm sure if Marwan Barghouti was released from prison, things would be a bit different, but he's in prison. So the PLO is being defanged, and Hamas is it. But now they've lost control of Hamas. Hamas has drawn in people who finally want to resist, and that's what's happened. So they maybe their initial control of Hamas gave them a false sense of security that they wouldn't dare turn on them that badly, aside from some attacks to satisfy the Palestinians. But I agree with Walter. The whole reaction is chaotic, and then now they're being attacked from Hezbollah's attacking, and they don't know what seem to want, and they're not going into the ground invasion. They've delayed that
for
again
a week.
and again. That seems chaotic. I agree with him. They're reacting. They don't really have a plan.
Yeah, for a week it's been. Any moment now we will begin the ground operation, and it still has not begun. But there's obviously the aerial campaign. But right now it's just the reflexive, as you said, hubris will cut off the water, cut off the fuel, cut off everything, and just make them leave to Egypt. But obviously Egypt and Jordan said that the exodus of those people would mean a fucking casus belli, call to war, the cause of war.
And
Israel,
they're right. And Israel has never needed a pretext to go and force Palestinians out of their homes. They're doing it constantly. That's all they've done since 1948. They don't need to invent some attack to wage war on Gaza. They do it all the time anyway.
Maybe the international public opinion needs a little bit more of just the Zionist ideology. There needs to be an attack to justify counterattack and the last piece of land grab. I think, for themselves they do whatever they want to the Palestinians, but they have to. They can't ignore the public opinion, especially since the left has been for decades on the Palestinian side, and it's different in the Ukrainian conflict. That was pretty new to everybody. The left is very split up. But what I wanted to ask is, the PLO was at its origin quite radical. Then it went more to the center, went more soft, and still they want to push it off the scene and replace it by Hamas.
Right. Well, I think they did that when they successfully beheaded it when they arrested Marwan Barghouti, who was still, I think, the most popular Palestinian leader. If he was freed, I'm sure he would be the head of every organization. There's a very good article by cousin Omar Barghouti, who describes how Hamas was created and how they drew strength away from the PLO. And Dr. Mustafa Barghouti, another cousin, who's part of the Palestinian Authority, gave an interview on Democracy Now!, which was actually not bad. They actually let him speak for 20 minutes. And
wow.
He said the
surprised.
PLO, he said the Hamas has been successful in drawing strength away from the PLO. This has resulted in internal bickering in the PLO and paralyzed it. Marwan Barghouti was arrested, so the head of the Fatah movement, the military wing, was arrested. And so a lot of people went over to Hamas, and that's where we're at. And that, you don't see the PLO Fatah active yet too much in the West Bank. Maybe they are, but I'm not informed. But you would think that the PLO military wing would be more active. Maybe they will become.
Hezbollah, though, on the Lebanon side, has been rather active. But here's the thing: what it looks like, bringing in two American aircraft carriers, a land assault ship, or something like that. There's also something like a command and control ship. Scott Ritter said the other day somewhere that those carry 4-star admirals, whereas an aircraft carrier just carries a 1-star. That's the big fucking command in the US. You don't need that if you got everything planned out. It's just like the Biden, come on, drag him here, give a speech for half an hour, and then fly away. All of this looks, I agree with the with the B option that Billy Bob hinted, that it looks panicked and reacting rather than anything else. But it is getting serious, because I don't know if you catch this. This was in China, where Vladimir Putin is. Because it's getting out of hand, he ordered that there should be one of the jets capable of carrying Kinjal missiles. I don't have the cheat sheet right now in front of me. The Sukhoi, I don't know, let's call it the 35. 24-hour patrols, 24-hour patrols above the Black Sea. They say they are. He specifically said this is not a threat. This is something we can watch if we want to. But they can move it with Mach 9, and they have a range over 1,000 kilometers, meaning all the Eastern Mediterranean Sea is within their target range. And that's saying from Russia, I think, calm the fuck down. Thank you, Gregor, MiG-31s.
Mm-hmm.
And go on.
Well, Gregor had some other commentary. He was talking about the JDAM. So
I definitely saw the evidence of airburst detonation, because the car's being pretty much flattened.
So that seems rather conclusive. And then as far as Putin's visit to the Rostov-on-Don, Gregor is suggesting it's due to, a little bit of a debacle with some Russian forces suffering some defeats, trying to assault the very, well-defended Avdiivka, or however you say it.
Avdiivka is a fortress. It's
so no, it's not going to be easy, but I mean, like the bottom line, like Chris was saying, is Russia's won that. I mean, it's a formality. Ukraine's still there, but it's just a formality. It's just a matter of time before the Ukraine loses. It's not up for discussion, but as that plays out, there's going to be better days and worse days for the Russian military. So the other thing I wanted to talk about was basically there's this idea that Israel did not go all in with the United States with regards to Russia. So Benjamin Netanyahu obviously was pretty pro-Trump, and I think that pissed off a lot of the liberal establishment that he was really tight with Trump, and Trump had a lot of fealty to Israel. He moved the capital. He was
the one who moved it to Jerusalem.
Soleimani. And so that kind of pissed off the U.S. establishment, and they kind of opened up a little bit of ability for Israel to be criticized in the mainstream media. I've seen an increase in criticism of Israel within the mainstream media. And then what further pissed off the Western liberal establishment is that Israel did not go all in with the U.S. On the Ukraine-Russia situation. They were pretty even-handed, and Israel has gone out of their way to maintain good relations with Russia. And I think that's also pissed off the Western establishment. So the question is, it seems that the West is leveraging the Israel-Palestine situation that we're currently seeing in order to force Russia to, in order to force Israel to, really go all in with the U.S. and get rid of any friendliness that they're trying to maintain with Russia. So I'm sorry, that did not come out very succinct and nicely. And I know we have a clip here. So Ben has prepared a clip of.
I think we should watch this together if you want to bring it up. This is Amir Weitman, who is part of the Likud party, which is Netanyahu's party, but he's the founder of, if believe it or not, the liberal part of it. We all know it's a kind of a far right party, Likud is, but it has a liberal wing, which is also rather right. So let's just enjoy this. Let me know if we should have audio, but let me know.
That I understand you're on the Russian payroll, and I understand this is a Russian propaganda, but you have to be very careful, because let me tell you, we're going to finish this war. We're going to win because we're stronger. After this, Russia will pay the price. Believe me, Russia will pay the price. Russia is supporting the enemies of Israel. Russia is supporting Nazi people who want to commit genocide on us, and just Russia will pay the price. Russia also. Now, listen to me very carefully. We are going to finish with these Nazis. We're going to win this war. It's going to take the time it's going to take, but we're going to win this war. Afterwards, we're not forgetting what you are doing. We're not forgetting. We will come. We will make sure that Ukraine wins. We will make sure that you pay the price for what you have done. You as Russia. and you and as all the enemies of Israel, and you as all the people who are now making everything they can to support genocide of the Jews in Israel. We are not forgetting. We are not forgetting. Remember exactly.
Anyway, there's 2 minutes of it, but the
Wow.
host was very, I guess, okay, calm. But this guy, Jesus, thoughts.
Well, the man's insane. I mean, is he? Hey, Israel cannot affect anything about the war in Ukraine. It has no capability. It's fighting for its survival in Israel. How's it going to do that? Unless it's threatening nuclear war against Russia. I mean, it's just. And then he manages to bring in, accuse the Russians of being supporting Nazis. This is when we know that the Red Army defeated the Nazis, and Hamas are not Nazis. But that's the meme they're going. This is genocide. This is a repeat of what happened to the Jews in Europe. And why? But why is Europe supporting Israel all the way through? Because of their own guilt about what they did to all the Jews in Europe for centuries and in World War II. And they're transferring their guilt to. They're trying to get shut off their guilt by being super supportive of Israel no matter what. It's their crimes that resulted in the situation in Palestine by doing what they did to the Jews in Germany and Poland and everywhere else in Europe, France and Italy.
That rhetoric to agitate, Zionists around the world against Israel or against Russia and pro-Ukraine. So that's something they haven't been able to do. Israel has maintained, a middle ground between Russia and between Ukraine and between the U.S. And that's the kind of rhetoric that benefits the U.S. interests, because they're really trying their best to get all of global Zionism and Israel wholly on the side of the U.S. and on the side of Ukraine and against Russia. So I think, but is it gonna work? Is it gonna succeed? I mean, that's the kind of rhetoric they want to hear, and that they're gonna try and leverage the situation with Hamas in order to get the government to do that.
Let me tell you where I heard something similar. That Hamas is far right. They're Nazis. They come from the Nazi ideology. Names not be named, but a lot of conservative and libertarians in America. I was very disappointed because they were very realistic about Ukraine, and suddenly this happens. 110% aboard. But I'm going to play a game. Name the European leader. He left before Biden arrived, who said the following. It's amazing. Our national task is to ensure the existence and security of Israel. Guess the European leader.
Scholz.
Yep, you're right. That is Olaf Scholz, who then, just like they did in Kiev a lot of times, they did the air raid siren, so he had to get off his plane.
So Scholz, as the Chancellor of Germany, his number one priority is to ensure that Israel is protected and defended.
Yes, it appears.
Maybe he should, go run for election in Israel.
It's very cynical because the Jewish flag was projected on the Brandenburger Tor. And
isn't that amazing?
That's just the transferring of the guilt. But I wanted to go back a little bit to World War II and what happened with the Jewish community. There was trauma, there was a need for security, and they had to find it outside the borders of Europe. While if you have an ounce of a sense of justice, it was Europe who had to provide the land. It was Europe, it was Germany who had to give, I don't know, a tenth of its territory to the Jewish people. It was Antwerp, the city where I live next to, that had to give a couple of blocks in the Diamond Quarter to the Jews and say, hey, you organize your life in a sovereign way. You can have a police force, you can have a constitution. That should have been done. And that was transported, the really paying or the Wiedergutmachung, as far as you can do it, was not done. It was, dumped in Palestine. It was as a colonial power does all the time, the toxic stuff that you have, you dump it, whether it's in Australia, whether it's in even the, as I'm right, the immigration to the United States and Canada was partly the people who were criminals or were not religiously accepted and so on. That is what Europe does all the time. It's one constant thing. And then, what Schultz right now says is, yeah, in a way,
So
it's right.
they had this guilt, and instead of sacrificing and accepting responsibility for the guilt, they force some weaker people to sacrifice, to do all the sacrificing to assuage their own guilt. I mean,
Right.
yeah, it's cynical and disgusting. The poor Palestinians.
Well, I think in 1945 or 46, the King of Arabia, was it King Faisal then still, met with, I guess it was not who's after Roosevelt, Truman, and Truman said they wanted to put the Jewish people into Palestine to give them a homeland, and he's replied, "Why would you want to, in the name of self-determination of peoples, steal one group's land to give it to another for events which happened in Europe? The criminals are in Europe. They should pay the price. Their land should be taken and given to the Jews because they're the ones that did the damage. But instead, you don't want them to pay the price. You're going to make the Palestinians pay the price for something they didn't do." And he says, "We're not accepting this. You can't do this under my watch." But it happened.
Wow,
anyway.
go Truman.
Well, not Truman. It was the King of Arabia
Faisal.
that said that. It was King Faisal said this.
Oh, sorry,
King
go King
Truman.
Faisal. Yeah.
Yeah, he said, "I'm not accepting your idea, Mr. Truman. This is crazy. You can't do that." That's what they did. So the Jews have been, the Jewish population, because of the terrible things that happened to them in Europe under the Nazis and the fascists everywhere, they were then used as a tool by the colonialist powers, the United States and Britain, by putting them in, going along with the Zionist idea and putting them into Palestine and using them as their cat's paw there ever since. And the Palestinians have suffered, and to hell with them. It's just so both these peoples have been used, and now they're being slaughtering each other for interests of everybody else.
And it's the victimhood that is siphoning over through the Jewish people to the Palestinian people,
Right.
and
Yeah.
75 years since the first Nakba, which was mostly a British project, but as you said, American as well. But the second guy, he just climbed out of like a military aircraft. He didn't come with the official thing. Was Rishi Sunak, the Brown Blair, to stand beside Netanyahu to say we are full support of Israel, and that was just telling of exactly the phenomenon you're talking about.
Yeah, and Sunak promised to send some Royal Navy ships to the Mediterranean, but it's just ridiculous. They don't have any ships to send. Their aircraft carriers don't work, so they're not sending them because they're just mothballed now, even though they're brand new.
They fixed some submarines with bubble gum, and then it broke down. That was the news last year. It's just
it's just. I grew up as a grand imperialist little British boy in England when we had a fleet of several hundred ships. I mean, to see it now is just that's really something.
I just wanted to comment on something that was it Gregor Pavlovich.
Hello.
Anyway, about the 200 tanks destroyed. I may be misinterpreting this around Avdiivka. Well, it's curious to me because here he is, Jankovic. It's curious to me because when two ATACMS missiles managed to destroy 2 helicopters in out
of 6 that were launched.
Out of 6 that were launched, that was big news in the U.S. But I've not heard about these 200 tanks destroyed around Avdiivka. I'm not saying I read everything, but I think the U.S. press would have made a great hay out of that.
Well, there was a report, if you watch the military summary channel, which I don't always trust, but they reported that the Russians in the advance on Avdiivka met stiff resistance because it is a heavy fortified fortress.
True.
And the Ukrainians are desperate, so they're making these counterattacks to stop being surrounded. And the Russians have lost 200 APCs, tanks, and other vehicles, trucks, and so on.
Oh, okay.
But I haven't seen that in TASS or any Russian press. I've only seen that in Western press. Maybe the Ukrainians are saying this. Maybe it's true. I don't know. I'm sure they're suffering losses. That's for sure. There's heavy fighting going on. So it may be
That's
true.
the issue.
200 seems like a very high number, but again,
That's the issue with Dima, military summary channel. He's a Belarusian guy with a Ukrainian girlfriend. He's always trying to spread, walk the line. And there's the Ukrainian intelligence, and then there's Russia, who provides the military updates, and they don't generally talk about losses. So I think in a week's time, if it ever comes out, there's video evidence of some Russian gear being destroyed. I think it will turn out to be maybe 1/10 of that, but what will it change in the grand scheme of things?
Not much.
The thing is, I don't think it matters.
No,
at all. It's like some country, I don't remember which one it was, not Britain, but some tiny country saying we are sending another 10 tanks, and that was like last week. Okay, that's the final.
I'd like to hit on Chris's statement about how all of the Western imperial countries, Britain and Germany and the United States, are all giving fealty to Israel. But I want to point out that it's not because they really care about Jewish people, right?
No.
Just like we're supporting Ukraine, not so much because we care about Ukrainians. In fact, we're happy to sacrifice Ukrainians, for our imperialist interests, and I shouldn't say for their imperialist interests. And it's the same thing in Israel, just like Chris was saying, that the Jewish people themselves were being exploited. And you actually had Zionists blowing up synagogues in Iraq and in the Arab countries surrounding Palestine in order to ramp up anti-Semitism, or the fear of anti-Semitism, and force Sephardic Jews in Iran and in Iraq and other countries to emigrate to Israel, because they needed workers, they needed people to be citizens of this new state. And so they didn't have the best interest of the Jewish people at heart. It was an imperial enterprise, and it continues to be an imperialist enterprise where Israel helps facilitate the extraction of wealth out of the Middle East, and also keeps the people from having their own sovereignty in Iraq. They would like to do that in Iran, in Saudi Arabia, and all around the Middle East. So it's just about imperialism.
Also, keeping them separated, the Arab family, keeping them separate and fighting amongst each other, not uniting.
And that's changing, though, right? So we see the rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran. Thanks, China, for working that out. We see the end of the war in Yemen. I don't know if the U.S. has any cards to play, if these carrier battle groups are going to be able to, if there's a military option for the United States. Any attack against Iran is gonna plunge the global economy into chaos, right? They can block the Straits of Hormuz, where 20% of the planet's oil passes through there. And if they block that, I think there's going to be a worldwide economic depression.
Yeah.
Already, I think
Biden
93.
Want that right before an election? Is that something Biden would like to see right before he has an election?
Look, it's stupid.
Well, there's already been an uptick in attacks on the U.S. Occupation forces in Iraq and Syria.
True.
The last 3 or 4 days.
Yeah.
So Iraqi resistance forces are getting active, and the ones in Syria. The Russians still keep. I don't know why they don't let the Syrian army just knock those bases out of Syria, but anyway, maybe it'll happen. But yeah, so there's increasing pressure in the United States in Syria and Iraq. I don't know if they can cope with all this if things keep going the way that's going, because Hezbollah is prepared for something big.
And looking at the diplomatic side, when did you ever see something like that? You probably know that after Tel Aviv, the next stop of Biden would have been, I think, Jordan, but it was supposed to be a pan-Arab summit, like the Qataris.
It was cancelled.
Absolutely cancelled. Fuck off. You're not coming here. Go.
Right.
That I don't think that ever happened, especially not in my lifetime. The US president can go fuck off home. And instead, Iran sent their foreign minister to Saudi Arabia, the guys who were supposed to be blood enemies forever.
Right.
And that's where the, I don't know, Islamic Cooperation Summit, something like IC Cooperation Organization took place, was supposed to bring up some very serious charges against Israel, including war crimes, including bringing the ICC in, perhaps, and maybe cutting off oil and the Arab countries exiting all the diplomats from Israel. And then it got watered down and basically nothing happened, just strong condemnations. But there's the other aspect, the ICC, very quick to condemn Vladimir Putin for saving children. Well, now we are at 1,500 dead children. What's going on? There have been some calls.
Let's get Chris to weigh in. So Chris is our resident international law expert.
Yeah, it's people have said why doesn't the ICC say something about what's going on in Palestine, Israel? And but they have. They opened a file in 2019. In 2021, I sent it to Billy. They came out with a decision saying that Israel has committed war crimes in the occupied territories in Gaza, and they recognize the West Bank and the large part of what is now Israel as occupied territories. Therefore, they have jurisdiction because Palestine gave them jurisdiction. So it's still Palestinian territories. They also said women Hamas may have done some war crimes, blah, blah. This is to do with the 2014 events. But they go on and say, we confirm that Israel has committed war crimes. And they describe various ones. But then they have a rambling several paragraphs following that, explaining why they're not going to do anything, which is we have to be very careful in our investigations. We're an international organization. We have to determine the real truth, not just go on the allegations and the facts we've learned now. We have to find out the entire truth. That may take us a long time. But of course, with Vladimir Putin, they didn't do any investigation.
Right.
They issued a warrant and a charge immediately as soon as the Kiev regime sent something in, and that was that. So we see what's going on. How they've. And I just came from a conference in Vienna. I was in your neck of the woods last week. I was in Vienna for a conference about international responsibility for why countries and states and international organizations are never found responsible for anything. And in that, I discussed these war crimes tribunals in general, but there was one, President Gbagbo of Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, was arrested by the French in 2011 and shipped off to the ICC and held on ice there for 10 years to keep him out of politics. And it was all arranged by the French. The French did a deal with Luis Moreno Ocampo, the then prosecutor of the ICC, and arranged with him that if the French could arrest Gbagbo and overthrow him, which they did, he would then be handed over to the ICC and held in, and they would concoct some charges and hold him in prison as long as they could, which is what they did. And yet the court then said in 2013, there's no evidence he committed any crime. He should be released. He wasn't released. Finally, last year or 2 years ago, the court came out after the so-called trial and said there's no evidence against this guy. He's freed. So the ICC helped French colonial interests by overthrowing the elected government, a president of Ivory Coast, putting in their man, a guy named Ouattara, who's ruined Cote d'Ivoire ever since. And the ICC helped them do that. That seems to be their role, to help Western colonial interests.
Chris, I hear you describing a softer, gentler neocolonialism and a softer, gentler imperialism, because back in the day, they would have just assassinated him. Right. So I guess we should applaud them for their progress.
Well, it's probably more effective politically because if they assassinate him, then everybody says, well, my God, you're bad. You assassinated this man. This way, it's all dressed up as legal in some sort of quasi-legal clothing and made it look like it's not them, it's the ICC doing it, you see.
That's what it is, isn't it? Like a costume, like dressing it up.
Yeah, it's just put this robes on and masks everything, hides the truth. And they've done that with several. They did with Kenyatta in Kenya. They did it with, well, we can go on and on about what they're doing. Yeah.
There was a second thing that happened at the UN as the US vetoed two ceasefires. Billy Bob, if you want to share my screen, that would be wonderful. I don't know if you've heard that Britain immediately went on to recruit people to condemn China for the Xinjiang things, you know, the discrimination, human rights violation against the Uyghurs, the Muslims there. Israel signed up to it, guys. Israel, while bombing Gaza, they dare condemn China. for what is allegedly a massacre in Xinjiang, what that tripled in population over the last 20 years.
Right.
And I thought that map was, these are always helpful, but those are the countries.
Quick geography quiz. What is that red country there in South America? Is that one country or two?
Good geography quiz in Central South America. I'm not
Looks
sure.
like
but
Uruguay.
Uruguay and Paraguay, yeah.
Okay, so those are obviously Western poodles. They're governed by compliant proxies.
I'm not sure about Uruguay.
Yeah,
they had
Paraguay.
Yeah, Paraguay.
Uruguay is quite far right. Yeah. They historically they were hosted Dan Mitrione, who was a CIA torture artist, and the Tupamaros murdered him. And Costa Gavras made a great movie about it called State of Siege.
Right.
They've been a long time, more or less, ally of the U.S. Occasionally, they'll get somebody in there that's not as sympathetic, but the United States gets them right back out.
Yeah.
So. I was looking at Africa, and there's one hole in there, and it's called Eswatini now. It used to be called Swaziland, and I don't know why, but they're the reflexive. I don't recognize Palestine, and I condemn China.
Yeah, shame on those governments. Hopefully the people don't share their government's perspectives. I wanted to talk about Moon of Alabama. I read a great article from him last night. So it's Bernard. I think he's former intelligence and he lives in Europe somewhere, but he's got great analysis. I mean, probably most people that are listening follow his blog, but he had an interesting take on the buildup of the U.S. war machine, the Navy, the two naval attack groups, and the Marines coming in. So his suggestion is that what they're going to try and do, they're not going to try and regime change Iran. They're not going to try and destroy Hezbollah. They're going to try and get Russia out of Syria. Now, when I read this, to me, it seemed fantastical because it seems like that's going to be one of the most impossible and most difficult tasks that could possibly be accomplished. And yet he seemed to be suggesting that that's exactly what the plan is. So so Chris, that was my look. That was my look when I read that. But it is Bernard from Moon of Alabama, so you've got to take it. You got to consider it. So I don't understand at all how that would be possible. Syria is stronger than they've ever been militarily. Right. Iran is also very powerful. Hezbollah is way more powerful than they were 12 years ago. Aren't all those forces going to unite and defend Russia's presence in Syria and defend the Russian naval base that they have there? I simply don't see. He says there's 135 planes that can really go a long way to remove Russia from Syria. There's 135 of the best trained pilots that can do that, NATO pilots. But that's the look I have.
He's suggesting that they're going to attack the Russians in Syria? I mean, that's insane. They're going to
militarily force them to leave Syria.
There's no way.
And that's the plan. That's the Western plan to get vengeance for Ukraine and to get vengeance for what Hezbollah or for what Hamas was able to do in Israel. That's their ultimate saving face gesture would be to remove Russia from Syria. So I thought I'd throw that out there, see what people's opinions are. Chris, I'm glad that you share my confusion and skepticism because when I read that, but people, you guys can go to the blog and read. It was yesterday's article. It was a good article otherwise, but to me, if that's true, I just scratch my head thinking that is never ever going to happen.
Look, it's lunatic enough, but if you look at anything from Blinken, I'm kind of thinking, this could be a real plan from this State Department. That's my.
Or you mean you're suggesting this guy's suggesting that the two aircraft carrier groups are going to be used to attack the Russians? Well, yes. that would be World War, right there.
You would.
I mean, the Russians are not going to. Politically, they're not going to abandon Assad, and they just reaffirmed their alliance yesterday. There was Assad and Putin had a phone call supporting each other.
Bernard's analysis is that the U.S. has enough, military force that they could do that.
The S-300 systems and the Russian air defense system would shoot them all. They wouldn't get anywhere near them.
That's true.
And then if they attack the Russian military bases, they'll be attacking. There'll be world war, nuclear war, right?
True, and he spent a week or so signing agreements and cooperation with China. China wouldn't sit this one out either. Absolutely.
So that may explain why this other you mentioned before, this constant 24-hour patrols of MiG-31s with Kinjal missiles over the Black Sea to be aimed at who? At the U.S. aircraft carrier groups if they try something like that. Wow, then we're looking at really serious prospects. If that's what Blinken is thinking, then we're going off the deep end. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, I wouldn't put it past him, but it is lunatic level.
So we're all in agreement that this isn't some grand master plan, that they're responding to events and they're looking for opportunities to have victories. So as they opportunistically respond to unfolding events, how far are they going to go? And what's going to happen? Are we going to see de-escalation or are we going to see escalation? I know we're just making guesses, but any strong thoughts? Does anybody have any strong opinions about the near future?
Well, I was suspecting that if you read the Russian press, the uptick in meetings between the Russians and the North Koreans is quite surprising. I would suspect that North Korea may act to put some pressure on South Korea and draw the Americans away from this, spread them thinner.
They've made noise exactly along
noise. That may be some grander strategy. The Chinese and Russians and North Koreans are speaking all the time, so they know what's going on. I think they've got a grander strategy in place.
I think they're smarter too.
Which is also dangerous because, when you start pushing there and pushing there and trying to divert people there, you don't know what's going to happen.
But it will contribute to the overextending of the Western Empire. I mean, they're really overextended as it is. And yeah, if North Korea forces even a greater overextension, it's just gonna. So I think if the West is serious about escalation, it's just gonna increase the efficiency of their demise. I don't see that there's any winning hand that they have for any kind of success or victories. And if they push the issue, it's just gonna accelerate their own decline. That's my perspective. Yeah. I don't see any winning play.
Just a telltale about the panic is because Israel is so close, near and dear to everybody left and right, as in Democrat and Republican. Axios came out the other day with a headline saying tens of thousands of the 155 millimeter shells, right, the ones that are used in the Ukraine war, they're getting transferred to Israel from the stock that was earmarked for Ukraine. That's how bad Zelensky is thrown under the bus.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can show you. I don't know if this is too small, but I can show you one. The reason I trust this guy is not because of military expertise or anything, but because we've been paying attention to this conflict in Israel-Palestine, and this guy, Norman Finkelstein, has been paying attention to all of them. And what he sees is pretty much the panic. And is it too small? Is it readable?
It's readable.
I mean, what are the options? They said ground offensive. Now, if they do that, they're going to have a lot of Israeli blood, right? It's going to be terrific. But they can't not do that because that would be political suicide for the what do you call it, regime, the Netanyahu regime. So they brought in Biden to greenlight it, and it's exactly like Carlo likes to talk about the USS Liberty incident. Then sort of, okayed.
So Norman Finkelstein, I think, is the world's foremost expert on Israel-Palestine. I mean, that's my opinion. So he's got this thread about behind Biden's visit, the hospital massacres, and Biden's lie. So Biden obviously very quickly corroborated the Israeli story and says they have evidence. Of course, it's secret. They have evidence that it was a Hamas rocket that destroyed the hospital. And he's saying that Biden agreed to embrace that lie and proliferate that lie if there was some de-escalation on the side of Israel and if they allowed some humanitarian aid into Gaza. Is that basically it, Ben?
But yeah, and he can look like the statesman who allowed this help to finally come in. It's an image massage, basically.
So that makes sense to me, because I do think that because they have no winning military option,
they really don't.
that
I
they
don't
want
see
to
it.
de-escalate. That de-escalation is the name of the game. But like you said, Ben, Israel can't de-escalate because that's political suicide. Netanyahu is in a position where, you know, he's got to do something, and de-escalation is going to be a loser for him. But it's also, escalation is going to be a loser for the you know, the larger imperial perspective. I think Gregor, it looks like he's in agreement regarding all of our collective opinions on Russia not being, you know, threatened. You know, they're not going to have to leave Syria, no matter what the U.S. tries to do. He agrees with that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with Gregor's statement there. I think that's probably correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking at it.
And World War III would be the ultimate result.
Right. But we also have to include the disarray inside Israel itself, with the politics, the recent
Max is right too.
Yes.
trouble about the Netanyahu trying to change the setup of the government, the constitution, and the refusal of reservists to come in and serve, and the strikes, and he's hated by half the population. I don't know if he's going to survive whatever happens, if his regime survives these events, but.
That's true, Christopher. 2 weeks ago, he was facing like corruption charges, possible jail time. He was in deep trouble.
Right. So.
But he's kind of politician who always lands on his feet. So I would not count too much on that. We've had in Europe such politicians as well.
Yeah.
And so. Well,
I think
what I want to know is.
Yeah, go.
To zoom in back again. Can they go in the north of Gaza and occupy that land?
That's
not without Hezbollah immediately.
I mean,
you know,
I mean, if the
northern Gaza. Yeah,
northern Gaza. The Israelis, can they have the land grab? Can they do that successfully? Because then it is a win.
But the thing is, Hezbollah has stated outright that any ground invasion of Gaza, that includes just the north, where they want to evacuate half of them down to the south, saying, "Okay, we're coming, we're joining the fight."
Yeah,
you know, it's the longer you wait, the worse it gets. If you do something, it gets worse. That's why I really don't see what the chess moves can be on the Israeli side.
No, going into Gaza will be like the battle for Bakhmut or Artyomovsk, or the battle for Advieka, which is developing. The Israelis would suffer huge casualties fighting in those urban street scenes and just rubble. I don't think they would.
Yeah. And the soldiers don't have the fighting spirit the way the Ukrainian soldiers have, because they're kind of, I don't know if that's true, but they're more like luxury soldiers who sit on a higher ground and shoot down on people.
They're good on TikTok. They've got some great dance moves.
Yeah, I love that, by the way. Scott Ritter calls them TikTok soldiers, and they do have those dancing girls and all that. But yeah, they are used to just shooting out on the barricades, the big,
Or is that too much a cartoonesque depiction of the Israeli forces?
Maybe, but here's one aspect I want to bring in, but I think Chris first. Go ahead. You had a thought, I think.
Well, I think whether the Israelis could succeed in taking Gaza is an issue, because the battle would be intense and long. The Israelis said it might be, I saw it was a Netanyahu or somebody said it might last 18 months. I mean, Bakhmut lasted several months. To try and take Gaza it's like attacking Stalingrad. It would be, and the Hamas fighters are equally, if not more, determined and motivated than the Israeli soldiers, because they're fighting for their people and their families and their lives directly. I think it would be very difficult. Maybe they could succeed by just flattening the entire area, but.
Yeah, that's the new catchphrase from the Israeli side: is a long war. It's going to be long and drawn out. I
don't think the Israeli economy can sustain that. And you have 400,000 men called up. That takes out of the economy. And if things get going in the West Bank, if the rebellions start in the West Bank and Jenin and all these places, Ramallah and Nazareth, all these places, I don't know how they can handle it. And the Hezbollah is coming from the north. I don't know how they can do that.
And that's
There's trucks full of Iraqis heading to the border, right, Ben? Yeah. I saw that on your summary.
Well, they're waiting for the path to be opened. They're ready to go.
And the Afghanis have said the same thing. The Taliban have said they want to send several divisions worth of men through Pakistan, Iraq, Iran to fight for the Palestinians. And they've asked
Kadyrov
permission to
also
have
in
go through.
Chechnya. The Chechnyans said the same thing, Chris.
Oh yeah, well,
And just to mention, you know, the Afghani government, what do you call them? Why am I blanking on the name?
Taliban.
The Taliban has not really been, you know, represented anywhere in international forums except for the Belt and Road Forum. They were there. They were there with a large group making deals, reconstruction, all of that is taking place in Afghanistan. People, because, you know, the US 2 years ago swooped out and they think, well, it's not serious. It's a basket case. No, sir. That place is being built up and being taken more seriously in diplomatic circles. But one other thing I wanted to bring in is the population thing. Is the first hours, the first few days, what I saw was everybody heading to the Ben Gurion airport because the image, this is from the amazing Garland Nixon, by the way. He has these observations that, why didn't I think of that? Was this is your safe haven. You know, you're being persecuted in Europe. You're being called bad names in different places. But if you come here on your rights of passage or whatever they call it, the right of return, and this is where you're going to be safe. You're going to live in a kibbutz. Everything is fine. That's the project. This is your safe thing. And immediately when that bubble burst, people were going, okay, even that Russian asshole, the privatization Tsar, immediately went to the airport saying, I'm out of here. Everybody back to Manhattan, back to Eastern Europe, back to wherever we're from, including Ukraine. If that bursts, I mean, that's seriously, there's no long-term, exactly like the US economic thing. How's the long-term sustainability, not just economically, but just based on bodies, if that meat grinder starts, you know, in the Gaza Strip? I just don't see it. It's like everything is pointing in wrong, bad direction.
Good point, Ben. After the Second World War, there was the trauma was super fresh, and the people, at least a big part of the Jewish population, wanted to have safety of in an own state. But since then, I think I don't know if they fear so much living in Europe or Northern America that much, and if they could re-immigrate to Europe. Because if 10-20% of the people, of the Israeli people, are going to do that, that will have an impact, on politics. That might be a little bit of a solution to weaken Israel from the inside. But then we have to see masses of people permanently change homeland.
It definitely is multifaceted. I wish I had the answers, man.
This is brainstorming. This is just,
Yeah, if you had a flood of suddenly Jewish refugees leaving the Middle East to go to Europe or somewhere, that would be a whole different scenario.
Because here in Belgium, right-wing parties are, you know, dancing arm in arm with the Jewish communities. You know, the ex-collaborators, they are behind everything Israel does, and that's, of course, that's the guilt, but they do that. So Jewish people don't have to fear anything anymore in Belgium. And right. The Israeli flag on the Brandenburger Tor might be a good thing for that. I don't know. I'm just how do you say?
When I was in Vienna, my host, Dr. Hans Kirschler, the International Progress Organization, told me he now lives in a section of Vienna which is a Jewish area, and it's all Hasidic Orthodox Jews. And he said they were never touched during World War II, and they're still there. And he says I live with them, and they're great people. And so there are places in Europe that would accept them quite quickly, but that's a strange scenario if you saw instead of people going to Israel but leaving Israel. But then the population of Israel is there's a couple of million Arabs. I mean, it's, 6 million maybe, 2 or 3 million Arabs. The Jewish population is not that large.
Oh yeah.
So and the demographics. I mean, obviously the Arab population is growing a lot faster, and that's why they continue with the ethnic cleansing, and they have all their apartheid laws in Israel. Carlo, you've been biting your tongue for a while.
Yeah, but it's because I want to say something really stupid. And
hey, I like that.
But I think Wouter there's a point what if Hamas and the attachment with the radical right, Netanyahu and his folks, is much stronger than we know and suspect, and this is sort of a setup as a land grab for Israel. It certainly put an end to the Israeli Saudi Arabia rapprochement, which was not particularly welcomed among right radical the right radical Israeli community. But also this land grab that of northern Gaza. What if that was an opportunity that Hamas gave to Israel to put that in play, because that's what's been done. It's not good play as far as we can tell from our perspective, but it is in play, and it wasn't in play before. And why it's in play is because 1,000 or 1,200 Israelis lost their lives. That's why it's in play. And I wouldn't put it past the cutthroats, not Netanyahu on down, to have seen that as a kind of instrument for this increasing land grab. I don't want to be too anecdotal here, but I used to have a customer who was very high up. One of them was very high up in the Golda Meir regime, and the other one was a very noted professor of history at American University, and they used to have conversations in my store, open conversations, and when they weren't talking Hebrew, I could understand them, and they would also include me in them, and it seemed to me that what was driving a lot of people in Israel was real estate, and that they were making millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, along with American components.
Simple capitalism.
Grabbing this real estate and setting up these kibbutzes and selling arms to protect the kibbutzes and the complicated system of walling in the Palestinians on the West Bank and that sort of thing. So there was this it was very cynical, and it was very much done in the name of money. Now I don't think of Hamas as people who are driven, motivated by money, but I could be wrong.
Like Pied Piper Hamas, that's the theory. Like playing to the hands of Netanyahu. That's either intended or unintended. I'm sure that to a certain extent, Netanyahu must have seen this as, first of all, it might get him off the hook with the basic law problem he was having, but it's also might if he ends up taking more territory, maybe the number of Israelis that were killed, it'll be, if not forgotten, mollified, and he will have something to show for it, northern Gaza, and he will have driven more Palestinians out of the country, or just killed them.
I think you're absolutely correct that that's definitely something they would like to do. Is it possible that they can do it? And I'm not sure about. I know even Jordan says that's not going to happen. Egypt says that's not going to happen. I mean, these are U.S. allies. Egypt gets more U.S. aid than any other country except for Israel.
And the largest base is in Jordan. Yeah.
Yeah. So these Western proxies are saying that's not going to happen, and it's a declaration of war. I don't know if they said that.
As a plan in Netanyahu's head, it's plausible.
And LCC will turn on a dime.
No,
and so will the king of
they
Jordan.
will. But I don't think the
turn
people
on a dime.
of the Middle East will allow it. But it'll be interesting to.
It would be. Yeah, I don't know. I just wanted to. I don't think what Wouter's saying is completely without consideration. You know what I mean? Yeah.
And are they drawing the U.S. in something that the United States don't know how to handle? But by creating a certain kind of chaos, the rules might change in that process. throwing the wrench in a machine to see maybe something breaks, an opening comes. Maybe it's not just pure desperation, but creative destruction, something like that, a new construction that the United States are forced into do and to act, especially because their military presence is there.
But that goes against everything that Machiavelli teaches us, But no, the chaos provides opportunism, and then they seize on that opportunism. But you don't want to be reacting to the actions of others. You want to be forcing the others to react to you. And I see the U.S. and the West and Israel, and is definitely they're reacting. They're reacting to the behavior of the resistance. And so let's see. Gregor thinks that Carlo is right, so I want to give Carlo props for that.
That's true. The U.S. is under huge
without
pressure to get
without
the fuck
seeing
out.
my psychological profile.
He's quoting Frank Herbert.
I disagree.
Chris,
I think. I mean, it's possible, of course. I mean, who knows? But I don't think it's likely. Otherwise, why is Hamas resisting so intensely? If this was a plot by Hamas with Israel to give them a pretext to take over Gaza, why are they resisting so heavily and having their families wiped out as we speak? You'd have to have a whole large number of Hamas officials and officers who are traitors and deserve to be hanged on lampposts. I don't see it. I think Hamas attacked on Yom Kippur because it was the October, the very successful Israeli attack against the Israelis in the Yom Kippur War in 1973. They'd been preparing for it, and they launched the attack because the bombings against Gaza the last year or so have been horrible. And we don't forget that the Israelis are now trying to take over the Al-Aqsa Mosque and allowing settlers to go in there, which is a desecration of the mosque. That was a fire, a fuse they lit they should never have lit. And I think that was one of the last straws. So Hamas decided to act. And what's the result? They've now cleared out several settlements in southwest Israel, the occupied territories, Ashkelon, the Sderot, those towns. They've been cleared of Israelis. They've been forced to leave. So they've lost territory, actually. And whether they can actually succeed in taking Gaza is a question. It doesn't look like this is planned so that they can take over Gaza. I mean, and they haven't even fully developed the lands they've occupied. Why would they want to take over more land? To clear out Hamas? Well, if they hadn't been doing these things, they wouldn't have to face Hamas in the first place. But I don't see that. I think this was not a grand plan. I mean, there's always people saying that there's always a deep state plot, and everything's arranged. It's not. These leaders are not that bright. They don't know what they're doing most of the time. Yeah. And I don't give Netanyahu that. I don't think he's astute. He's a sleazy, crafty, cunning man. I don't think he's that intelligent.
No. I agree.
I'm with Chris on that one, yeah.
So yeah, I agree with that.
But I agree with Billy Bob that they do capitalists always take advantage of whatever situation it is. And okay, this has happened, and what are we going to do in response? Well, we're going to try and get them out of there. But I thought maybe the bombing of the hospital would be like retribution, and then Netanyahu could say, well, now we killed these many Palestinians. Okay, like we can ease off now. But
yeah, when's the blood enough?
Yeah, that's enough. So now we can talk. But that doesn't seem to be happening yet. So.
True. But I'm completely with you on that point. I mean, these are people who thought this big major counteroffensive would take Crimea, go all the way to the eastern thing, right? They televised it. They knew where it was going to go, and when it failed, ever since then they've been improvising. Let's do this. Let's do that. Let's send this. And it would be it's just, I don't know how long we're going to go, but like a final thought from me, if this happens, like maybe there's an exodus, like people going back to Europe, back to America from Israel. At the same time, Europe seems to be purging the Ukrainians. A couple of weeks ago, the Swiss offered, I think, 1,500 euros for Ukrainian refugees to go back home. Now it's the Norwegians who are doing something, 12,000 kroner. I don't know exactly what that is for a ticket. to go back home, and the British are even better. They just let the thing expire, the housing for the Ukrainian refugees. So basically, they are a lot of the NATO accounts who still exist saying, "Oh, we're going to be hundreds of thousands homeless in the UK," and what do we do? Like, it's come to that point where Europe has just given up on this, and what if people went back to their place of origin? Would be interesting. But I completely with you that there's no grand plan in a lot of these times. These are Andrei Marchanov comes to mind. These are amateurs with very, very basic training, not the level of Lavrov or Gerasimov or Shoigu. They really are not.
But they might believe in their emotional stupidity. They might believe that it's possible. They might go in. They might cause a lot of damages on both sides. I think we all agree that, the hegemonical shift is happening under our own eyes, but we are fearful. We are afraid of, the proportion of damage that the declining hegemon will cause in its fall. So
yeah. The greatest country in the history of the world. Of course, we can support Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan. That scared me more than anything.
We can afford 2 proxy wars at the same time. We're the U.S. God damn it! Let's remember who we are.
But you haven't even got a functioning Congress. So
That's right.
True. Is there a speaker now?
No,
still no.
no.
And not likely to be one for a while, the way it looks. So how can they pass anything? The legislation can't get through, can it, without a House Speaker? As I understand your system, I don't know.
That's right. That's right.
I love that they called Russia the gas station with nukes. It looks like it's a printing machine with hubris.
But politics is not that important. I think in Belgium we have the world record of being without a government after the election.
Belgium has that record.
I think maybe it's changed after that. It's
there's so many parties and so many autonomous regions.
Yeah. But the great thing about it was, our life went on maybe even better than before, because people were assured that nothing changed for the worse. So there was a kind of calm political atmosphere. So electoral politics is not that important in the real. So just want to throw that in.
I also want to bring up a point that infuriates me, and this involves the media a lot, to a great degree, and that is the so-called immigration crisis here in the U.S. Well, you wouldn't have an immigration crisis in the U.S. if U.S. foreign policy had destroyed all of these countries in Central America and forced the people to flee them. And if you want to go down, it's legion how the U.S. has harmed Central America and South America too. It's all in the history books. So when the media goes that we have this immigration problem, and they don't include the notion that U.S. foreign policy is responsible for that problem, I think that's something that they should be held accountable for. I don't know how, but that if there's an ICC for the media, that would be, I would have thousands of candidates for that. And it's so infuriating because I have to sit here and listen to this slop and they don't follow through. Why do you think people from Guatemala are coming here, or Honduras? Well, you turned Honduras into they've got a decent president now, but when you overthrew Zelaya, you let the international drug smugglers in connection with the Central Intelligence Agency come in and basically destroy the country, turn it into gang warfare. Same with El Salvador, where this guy Bukele is just basically locking up thousands and thousands of youth that have MS-13 tattooed their foreheads because they're dumb and they're in prison for life, and their families are fleeing because those people around them have threatened their livelihood. They set up a little stand, they sell a few goods, and it's like the mafia. They have to pay protection money, and so after a while they flee. After one of their uncles is killed, or one of their daughters is kidnapped, and that's all U.S. It's all on U.S. foreign policy, and the media here does not mention it. It's
Great point, but
outrageous.
let me add that Europe is a fucking appendage, and they should think about it, because obviously there's Syrian refugees here. Well, who destroyed Syria? NATO did. And now they're whining about the refugee crisis. A lot of the people, well, try to stay out of their countries would be a good message to both appendixes. Of
Libya, look at Libya. Yeah, I mean, everywhere, really everywhere.
You know? Yeah, try not to bomb their homes in the first place would be a good message.
Like we said last week, the Chinese, you build them, China, and we'll bomb them. You know, so.
And the British want to deal with their refugee problem, migrant problem, by shipping them all to Central Africa, Rwanda, this dictatorship, which is where leaders murdered millions. That's the British solution, which is illegal under all sorts of various laws. If you try and get to Britain, you're gonna end up in the middle of Africa.
What's beautiful is you might I don't recall the name, but I think that is done by an Indian heritage.
Sunak, Braverman. Yeah, these are immigrants to England, and now they're
drawing up the drawbridge behind them. Isn't
right?
It?
Yeah,
good metaphor. Yeah.
The Raj is long
angles
forgotten.
of hypocrisy.
Well, that's the threat. If you're going to come to Britain, you're going to end up in a worse place than you ever imagined. So don't try. Don't try.
Yeah, some of the best videos I've seen were from Ukrainian refugees who came to Europe, and they're just very dissatisfied with the shitty food, the shitty crap. And they go into supermarkets, and this apple doesn't taste like a real apple. This crap doesn't taste like. Well, you came here to the nice, sophisticated West, and there are plenty of these.
Yeah, but in Britain now they're placing refugees on barges in the ports. They're not allowed to be on land. They put them on barges, and they're holding them there. In fact,
that's the legally gray area, isn't it?
Yeah. When I was in Vienna, I was hosted at this fancy hotel, and outside of all these high class cars, like $600,000 Maseratis and Lamborghinis and all this. And I was talking to a guy, and he said, "Yeah, look at the license plates on those cars, and they were all Ukrainian." He said these cars are being driven not by elderly men your age, they're driven by young men in the 20s and 30s, and they're being paid a stipend of 2,000 euros a month or something to stay in Austria. People are very angry because they got these cars which could support them for many years if they sold them. They're not asked to sell them, and people are very resentful of that.
Monaco Brigade.
Where they're not resentful is the Monaco Battalion. All these people living on the Riviera from Ukraine with their yachts.
Yeah.
Apparently, Reznikov, the previous defense minister, also managed to smuggle some billions. I don't recall the thing before he left. He's in the UK somewhere now.
Yeah, the money coming out of Ukraine is nice, but also the well-educated people. That's quite unique, of course, as refugees go. Compared to people from Africa, they don't have that because of colonialism, of course. But they might
brain drain, yes.
Yeah, the brain drain. So, but you're saying the brain drain doesn't happen in Africa? It happens, but it's happening in Ukraine.
Yeah, I mean, Gaddafi wanted to educate Africa, but we know how that story went. So,
Well, look, there's about 4 or 5 million Hungarians abroad, mostly in the West, but Poland is the worst. They have 2 Hungaries worth of Poles abroad in the West, 20 million of them.
So much.
Went to look for opportunity with traditional good, socialist education, mostly ending up in the West. That's tragic in and of itself. I just wanted to, I guess we're winding down. One cute, funny story, because I remember in New Zealand, we went to this special little village. It's called Wangamomona. And I checked up on it because you mentioned, Wouter, Belgium was the place without an actual political leadership for the longest time. And this place, it's called the Wangamomona Republic in Taranaki region. And they always elect an animal as the mayor of the place. It's a beautiful little town. And I just had to look this up. From 1999, it was Billy Gumboot the goat. Then it was Ty the poodle. And the latest mayor is Mutt or Myrtle the turtle Kennard. These were the mayors of that place. And it's a thriving place. Just, think of alternatives.
Yeah.
That would be an improvement, I think, in the United States. If we put an animal on the ballot, they actually would do pretty well, I suspect. Guys,
Yeah.
it's been an hour and a half. I really appreciate everybody joining us. Carlo,
But they ran a fern for president.
did they?
A fern plant, yes. Maybe
All right.
before your time.
I like Walter's where he is in Belgium. It's actually, I think he's right. Belgium is one possible solution for the Israeli-Palestinian situation. Not a two-state solution, a one-state solution.
Yeah.
But where it's run like Belgium, where the Walloons and the Flems live together, and then it's all very, very complicated. The parliament, very, very complex. It's always hard to understand it, but it does work.
Yeah.
And why couldn't it work in Palestine and Israel?
I mean,
Possible.
it's not just US meddling and the hatred for 70 years, but the two-state solution has become impossible. And you can call me a dreamer, but you look at Syria, just next door, and there's Christians, there's Muslims, there's Orthodox, there's all the people living together. And maybe one day, I don't know how, I'm just not, but maybe that is the only viable solution for a future Israel-Palestine, is a one-state solution.
We don't need an apartheid state. We can have universal human rights for everyone, regardless of your, identity, religious identity, cultural identity. Universal human rights for everyone. We don't need a state just for certain people.
Yeah, one state expanding at the expense of the other, it contains the seeds of its own destruction. It just can't.
Well, Omar Bourgouti said in this interview, I should send you guys, is we Muslims have no problems with Christians or Jews. They're just people of the same book. We don't care about religion. It's not that important to us. We all believe in the same God, blah, blah. And we're all Semites, all of us. And we've been here as long as the Jews came out of Arabia originally. So what is this? This is a colonial imperialist issue. That's what's caused this problem. And imperialism and colonialism has created the problem. But they can't be left to create the solutions because it'll just make it worse. So,
if there's still viewers around homework, there's some black and white photographs of Palestine 1947, 46. Just look at how people lived there. They were already all the Semite people there, and it didn't look like it does today.
That's right.
Yeah, there's been a population of Jews for thousands of years, and they've lived in relative peace and prosperity with their neighbors. It can happen again. Walter?
Yeah. Once the material conditions of where you live in are okay, there is no nationalist or separationalist party that can do anything. The largest party in Belgium, that is the party I was referring earlier to. They are the collaborators' sons and daughters from the World War II. They want to separate Flanders from Wallonia. They're the largest party in Belgium, but they don't dare to hold any kind of a referendum because maybe 10 or 20% of the people in Flanders would want that. So it's very popular as, posturing, but nothing else. When push comes to shove, people say, no, Belgium is okay. We just want to, complain a little bit about each other and that's it. Because, why would we? The material conditions are not going to improve or whatever.
May that be the future for Israel-Palestine one day.
Yeah.
Gregor is in agreement. It wasn't a debate; it's a discussion. we're mostly all in agreement. Thank you guys very much. We've gone an hour and 40 minutes almost. We're going to invite you guys back, Chris and Walter. Thanks, Ben and Carlo. Hang out after the show. We'll talk a little bit more. Thank you, everyone, for watching. We'll be back on Tuesday.